But man, the payoff is so much higher and the ROI is amazing. Because as I said earlier, like the higher the barrier to entry is to one of these festivals, the more it only attracts the people who really want to go and the people who have the level of experience to know that they enjoy that kind of vibe. And it also ensures that like people who go, like they really want to be there, right? This is modern day Hippie. We are your homies who've done nearly every drug under the sun. Over 600 psychedelic trips and nearly every kind of bender you can possibly imagine have armed us with a universe of knowledge. I'm Yuki, and with my co-host Reggie, we talk about how we do drugs in a responsible, safe, and fun way to improve our lives. Before we dive in, and so we don't get sued, a quick legal disclaimer.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Our goal is to educate and inform others about the realities of substance use in an engaging and entertaining format. We share these experiences so you can learn from them without trying them yourself. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to attempt to recreate anything found in this episode or in any of our other content. We are not confessing to any acts stated in this podcast. The content in this episode should not be treated as factual or real in any way.
With that, we welcome you through our portal and hope you enjoy the show. What's up, hippies? Hope you're having a vibey day so far. Reggie, how you been, man? What's the latest?
It's been good, Yuki. You know, man, just still on this 420 fast. So no drugs that could show up on a drug test, but you know, we still gotta do some drugs, right? So
Amen.
The other day, I decided to paint the home office, which some of y'all may notice that my background is a different color than it was in a few of the other episodes. And I was like, fuck it, dude. Why would I do this sober when I could do it on acid, right? So I took 4 tabs of acid.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I'm just going to be in this room until it changes colors, you know? And I just painted the room. And it was really fun, honestly. I got pretty into it. There was like a UFC fight that was going on that night. And I like played it in the background too, in addition to music. And like whenever I was like peeking and painting, the colors was just, I don't know, man. There's just something about painting and tripping that I never really appreciated until I just did it. Like on that level, you know? Like we used to paint little pictures and shit in college when tripping, but like I've never painted a whole room before while on so many drugs. And it was just honestly a great experience. Like I really appreciated it. I think I did a good job. And I got it done, you know?
Damn. Yeah. Were you not worried that you'd fuck up certain parts or that you wouldn't even be sure like how well you were painting parts of it? Because I mean, like painting a wall, it's not hard, but it's also like you do need to make sure it looks somewhat uniform, right?
Yeah, I was a bit worried, but you know, I watched a few YouTube videos in advance on like the best way to do it. And then I taped down all my corners and like used the brushes for like the edges and then the rollers for like the large spaces and just kind of doing it textbook in a way. And it just worked out. And I also like wasn't working with too much paint at first.
Okay.
And so it was also just kind of like a challenge in my head to like see if I could spread this paint like across the wall and make it like work. And ended up working out. So, yeah, I will say though it's not perfect. There are a few places where I taped a little bit too much, like of the blue, which was the old color. I taped just a little bit over the blue. So there are a couple of edges I need to go back and like touch up with a paintbrush.
Okay.
Most people, like 90% of people would walk into this room and not notice that, I'd say.
Nice. Well, yeah, honestly, it sounds better than what I would have expected from 4 freaking tabs, man. That's pretty heroic. I feel like if I had done that and taken 4 tabs, I would have not only forgotten what I was trying to accomplish, I would have forgotten who I was. I'd be like, what is paint?
Yeah, to be fair, the tabs were pretty old. It's the same batch that I gave you for Burning Man, so
nice.
They weren't fully potent, so, but I mean, 4 tabs is 4 tabs. It definitely hit me.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Like a train.
Regardless. Damn. Well, I'm glad you had fun painting a room, man. It's probably the most fun someone's had painting a room in quite a while, eh?
Right?
Yeah. Well, nice. Excited to hop into today's topic. And that is talking through what I see as the different types of music festivals, which I would broadly batch into 3 different categories, and going through what those categories are, what the pros and cons of each type of festival is, and most importantly, how you want to think about the drugs that you're taking that festival that you bring into it and how to kind of curate your experience given the drugs in that festival setting.
Nice. Yeah. What are the three?
Yeah, man. So at a high level, I think of music festivals in these three categories. The first type are what I will call city music festivals. So these are festivals that take place inside of a major city, right? You're talking like Lollapalooza in Chicago. You're talking like Gov Ball in New York. You're talking like Austin City Limits in Austin. All these festivals that are essentially inside of a city, usually in a park, but sometimes in a big arena. I know I've been to some in Seattle that are in like sports arenas that are kind of converted into maybe a weekend festival venue with maybe just one stage, maybe two. The second type of festivals that I think about are camping music festivals. These are ones that are usually more out in the wilderness. They're not in cities, and they usually require that you camp or potentially stay at hotels. But for the most part, I think the camping experience is quintessential to these. So we're talking things like Electric Forest, Shambhala. I know like Coachella, for example, you can stay in hotels or you can camp, but I would classify that kind of as like honestly between these two categories, but you get the gist of that. And then the third type of music festival is what I would classify as Burning Man and Burning Man adjacent. And what makes these festivals unique is that there's no central commercial authority who's actually putting on the festival. Because whether we're talking city festivals or camping festivals, it's being put on by Insomniac, by the local city, by some event production company who's responsible for this. And then same goes for the camping ones, like these big ones, they're put on by these big companies that ultimately do want to make some money off of them. And then, right, with these Burning Man and regional burns and burn adjacent festivals, these are ones where it's not a money-making venture. And even in Burning Man, technically, you do have the Burning Man nonprofit that helps coordinate a lot of the central organizational part. So much of the experience is kind of on you as the attendee and on the camps to bring to that experience. And so I think that makes it a very unique standout, both from the attendee perspective, from the music and the experience, and as well as the drugs that go into it.
Nice. Man, I have so many questions, but I want you to get into them a little bit more because maybe you're going to answer them as we go.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, starting off with the city music festivals, and honestly, the order I told them in, I would say is a good general order to follow if you don't have much experience with festivals or you want to get more into them. And they generally go from more accessible to less accessible in terms of how much effort and planning it takes to get to them. There is a financial component to them, although I found that the financial aspect is not quite as linearly correlated with the types of festivals as you might expect. I'll go into that as well. The other thing to consider is, in my experience, the harder a festival is to get to, especially falling on those categories, the more kind of honestly special it feels and the more like mature and developed the crowd feels at those festivals. And so I'll go into details of why I feel that way and what you kind of experience at each type of festival at each level. So starting off with the city festivals, these are ones that anyone can go to, right? I mean, we, kind of partially grew up going to a city music festival, and that was something that we went on a regular basis. And this was a place where it's like, you have everything from families with kids all the way down to high schoolers and college students. And it's something that, on one hand is accessible. It's very easy to get to. The tickets tend to be not too expensive, though honestly, seeing ticket prices these days, they've definitely gone up significantly for these 2-3 day city music festivals. And because it's so accessible, right? On one hand, it's nice because it's easy to get to. And when you're there, you can buy food and fill up your water for free usually. And you have all these amenities that are built into it. But the trade-off of that is that you're dealing with a lot of people who, if, depending on what vibe you're on, and especially for me, as I've gotten more into kind of like rave culture and Burning Man and that side of things, I feel a lot less drawn to the city music festivals because it's like you're partying with high schoolers who are getting drunk for like some of their first times, just getting super messy and just being obnoxious. And I know even me as a college student towards the end of college, when I was going to these types of festivals, I was just like already over the high school crowd or the young college student crowd. I'm like, man, I just want to relax a little bit. And I already found myself like in crowds, I'd gravitate towards being towards the back of the crowd, just chilling out a little bit more. And now I've gotten to a point where I've had other experiences where I'm like, dude, I can't even imagine going back to a place where it's like, I'm hanging out with people who are just, it's not necessarily that they're young. Like there are people who can be young and super experienced with this kind of stuff, but it is correlated because it is just, I think, a level of experience, right? It's like you build up kind of your level of experience and like your repertoire of events that you've gone to, and you get a sense of just how to be respectful of other people, how to be adequately prepared, right? Just simple things like making sure your water is filled and making sure you're like filling it up between every like major stage you're going to, and learning how to prioritize different artists you want to see. And of course, planning out what drugs you're going to take and how much you're going to take, and knowing how to do that in a responsible and educated way, right? These are things that I found I very much started to take for granted, but that's only because me and the people I hang out with now, like we have gone through our fair share of music festival and music event experiences. And like we've made our fair share of mistakes. Like I've gotten plenty sauced and plenty fucked up at my city music festivals. And honestly, in a way, that's a good and safe place to go and do that. Because if, God forbid something bad happens, there's always medical staff on site. If something really bad happens, you're in a city, like you can take you to a hospital or something. And there is help there and it is accessible. And you are not by any means in the middle of nowhere. You're probably like in a park in the middle of Chicago or New York City. And all things considered, like you'll be fine. Yeah. So any questions on the city music fests?
Not so much questions, more comments, but just from my experience with those, I feel like there's almost a lack of unified culture. Like you said, people are kind of coming at it from different walks of life, different angles. They want different things out of the festival. And I think that causes a little bit of chaos. And there's also, I think out of the three categories that you mentioned, my guess is that the city music festivals have the most alcohol culture, which me personally, I feel like as far as enjoying music goes, there's just so many better substances to fully immerse yourself in music and enjoy it than alcohol. I feel like alcohol, if anything, like can take away from the music in a sense. But I mean, that's just my hot take. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And what I've noticed with a lot of these city music festivals is the lineups will span a very wide variety of music. And so you do get people who are into very different things, and definitely +1 to the drinking culture as well. Like in my experience, there is alcohol at all of them, but at the city ones, that's where you have, I would say, the more like the most normie crowds, which, and not a bad thing. But it's people who are, most accustomed to alcohol and probably have very minimal or no experience with other drugs. So that's something to consider. In terms of the drugs to do at city music festivals, the biggest factor I think of, honestly, with these three types of festivals is actually getting your drugs into them. So with all these city music festivals, everyone I've ever been to, there is security that you're going through to get in. They're checking bags. You're going through a metal detector. For me to bring in drugs, I'd usually just put them in a Ziploc bag, stuff them like in my pants, like on top of my crotch, and be fine. Just make sure there's no like metal elements in what you're bringing in, of course. Or small things you can put at like the bottom of a small backpack, stuff like that. Like I'd have friends in the past who would like buy fake sunscreen bottles and fill them with alcohol and sneak stuff in that way. But for those, you're probably taking an Uber or something like from where you're
or you bury a bottle of alcohol in the park before the festival and then you just dig it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Classic. The first time I heard of that happening was for Outside Lands, which is a music festival in San Francisco. And yeah, apparently that's like not uncommon to do. People do, which is fucking hilarious. Like, can you imagine you turn around and you're like, what are these people doing? Taking a hole to dig out like some bottles of liquor.
I can't find it.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to category 2, which are the camping music festivals. So to me, these are a big step up. I think it's a bigger step up from city festivals to camping festivals than from camping festivals to Burning Man and Burning Man adjacent festivals. And the biggest reason for this to me is because it requires considerably more planning and preparation for these camping music festivals, because not only are you going for a day to party, but you're going to stay somewhere for multiple days and nights, right? You need to think about like camping equipment and preparing for that. And honestly, for people who don't have any or much experience camping, that is a pretty high barrier to entry, right? Figuring that out, even just having the equipment, knowing what kind of tents and like amenities are important for you to have a pleasant experience. So that definitely kind of ups the difficulty level. But man, the payoff is so much higher and the ROI is amazing. Because as I said earlier, like the higher the barrier to entry is to one of these festivals, the more it only attracts the people who really want to go and the people who have the level of experience to know that they enjoy that kind of vibe. And it also ensures that like people who go, like they really want to be there, right? And these camping music festivals tend to be, ones that are maybe a lot more like EDM specific, or there are ones that like, I know they're like country music ones and things like that I know nothing about because my world is all EDM, but it's like, that's where you get like even more specific, right? And you have festivals that are specific to like bass music, for example, or techno or minimal house, or just things where it gets a lot more niche. And the more niche it is, the more it brings together like the right people who 9 times out of 10 know the vibe they're getting into and they really want to go there. And so a festival that I kind of look to as being pretty unique, even within this category of camping music festivals, is one called Desert Hearts in Arizona. And this is a 3 or 4 day music festival that has only one stage. And this one stage plays music pretty much 24 hours straight.
Damn.
And unlike a lot of festivals where you have a half dozen stages or more, everybody who goes to Desert Hearts, they know exactly the vibe that's being curated. And there's that one stage. And it's like, either you know what you're getting yourself into and you're stoked and you're like there bringing your best vibes and your highest energy, or it's not your vibe and you're not even going because it's one stage and there's not anything that like probably particularly, would excite you. Honestly, I think that works out very, very well. And the other aspect here to consider is I really feel like we're living through what I would dub the golden era of music festivals. And to me, there are so many good camping music festivals these days. Like they are a dime a dozen, and whatever vibe you're looking for, wherever you live, there are options. And it's gotten to a point where we might be kind of getting towards the end of this golden age, because especially in 2025, there are some pretty established EDM festivals that were announcing that they're either taking the year off or completely shutting down, just because I think there's an oversaturation of festivals. And
What?
I think people have, there's a big increase in people spending money on experiences and travel coming out of COVID. People are missing that. And, they either had the stimmies or just a bit more money saved up. And so I think we're really kind of seeing the end of that trend. And so it's a bit of a shame. There have been some really cool local festivals that I've heard of that have gone out of business, which is quite sad to see. But with that said, there are still plenty to go around. And these are ones where it's like, my recommendation is get a group of friends together or find a group that you can camp with, and you can set up these group camps and work together, right? Like if you're not super experienced with the camping aspect, you can work with your group. You guys can bring communal things like grills and food and make sure you guys are staying fed, and make sure you're supporting each other. And the nice thing is that at most of these music festivals, you'll still have things like food vendors, water providers, things like that, where it's like worst case scenario, you can still go buy food and still like make do. If you didn't bring a jacket and it ends up being cold.
Even at these camping ones?
Yeah. So they actually, most of them are actually quite picky about the vendors they hire, but it's pretty cool. If you go to a couple, you'll see a lot of the same vendors over and over again. And a lot of the people who run these businesses, whether they're selling outfits or fans or flow toys, their business is they just make the rounds at these festivals every festival season, just kind of selling their wares. And I've run into the owners of these like multiple festivals across countries, which is pretty neat. And there's some that are like pretty well known. And so I've had friends be like, "Oh, you should go check out this vendor." Like they'll probably be at Electric Forest or Shams or
nice.
And so there is that convenience aspect, right? Of like you if it's 4 a.m. and you're hungry, you don't want to cook yourself some fucking food on the grill, you can go buy some.
Is it like cash only, or like do they accept like modern payments? Like
yeah, they accept other payments. Usually. Apple Pay, credit cards, the usual. And a lot of these festivals do have like pretty serious vetting processes for both the food vendors and the sellers of like items that they let go there, which is good to see, because that is honestly a meaningful part of the experience. Like,
do they have like Wi-Fi and like cell coverage? Like how remote is this? You know what I mean?
It totally depends on the festival. Totally depends on what cell provider you have. From my experience, the cell coverage, it is dependent very much on just where it is and what the general access is to cell coverage in that area. But in my experience, these festivals are also pretty spread out. There will be kind of the main festival grounds where the stages are and a lot of the vendors are. And then around it, there will be different camping areas. Like some of these will be free tent camping. Some of them will be premium tent camping. Some of them will be RVs. And every festival has its own system, right? So for example, like this year, I'm going to Electric Forest for the first time. And Electric Forest has its own map and setup and camping options. And I don't know shit about that. but I'm going with a group that goes every year and they're like, all right, we're getting these types of campsites because these are like worth it and they're close to the festival and all that jazz. But generally these festivals do have specific areas where they'll have like plazas where like food vendors will be, or these like sellers of different like apparel and rave gear and whatnot, like all kind of congregate. So those are cool. Trade-off there, right? I mentioned it's definitely takes more planning and usually you have to fly somewhere or take a road trip. So that bumps up the price, even if the tickets themselves are usually not that much more than the city festival tickets. And then the other consideration is that because you're traveling, you need to be a little more careful with how you're transporting your drugs, especially all these festivals like I fly to, because honestly, it's just more convenient for me and it's faster. And so those like, either you need to figure out a way to ship your drugs, see if you can buy them from someone on the site, or, do it pretty low key. Like in the past, I've flown with like, edible mushrooms, like in chocolates. I haven't had any issues with those, but I personally wouldn't do that with weed edibles. Anytime I'm traveling with powders, my go-to method is I'll fill up empty vitamin capsules, like a capsule that you would just take as like a pill. I'll fill those up with a powder and I've never had any issues with that. But of course, there are risks there. And beyond that, like it can be pretty tough. And I've talked to so many people who have so many different methods of like traveling with their drugs, but that's something that can make it a little bit tougher to get your things there and have a good time. And then once you're there, you need to make sure that you're pretty experienced and know what you're getting yourself into with your drugs, because these big festivals, they are obligated to have like EMS on site. Because when you have thousands or tens of thousands of people, like people are going to get injured, even if it's not drug related. And so you need those personnel on site. A lot of these festivals are in pretty secluded areas, in forests, in mountains. And, you don't want to end up in a bad situation where it's like, not only are you, further away from a place where you could get like serious real help, but also it's not just like you can go to the comfort of your home after like a rough night. You're going back to your tent and it might be sunrise and it might be hot and dusty.
Oh my God.
And you need to be fucking prepared for that, because otherwise you're going to have a tough time. So that's something to consider. But also like these difficulties are what make it so special, dude, right? Like in the episode we recorded when I got back from Shams, like, dude, most of the people in my group camp, I met them at Shams. Like I had one friend who brought me into our group camp. We spent that 5 or 6 days together. Most of them I haven't seen in person since, but dude, I feel emotionally closer and more connected to these people than, a decent number of people who I run into in my day-to-day life or like kind of lose friends, because it puts you through this crucible and these obstacles and these pretty hard experiences that you don't experience in your day to day. And I'm pretty sure we talked about exactly this in our Shams episode. That like brings you close together, man. And that is so special. And you get back from these experiences and you get back to your normal life and you're like, damn, like I just lived like a whole freaking lifetime as like a fucking wook camping nomad, right? And like that is a unique experience. And that to me is so worth it. And definitely can like push you out of your comfort zone. It's like, if you like music or you just like are curious about an adventure, that is my recommendation. Like, test out a city music festival or two, but man, the camping festivals are where it's at. And that's where you get people who are diehards. Like they go to the same festival every year and they've been going for 5 or 10 years, or they're kind of doing their own little circuit of their favorite festivals. And people there are just like super nice and they try so much harder on like their outfits and their vibes. And man, it's just like wonderful. Like vibes going from city music festivals, camping festivals are just like X, in my opinion.
Damn, I believe it. Wait, so how do you top that then? What's this next level, man?
Yeah, man. So the third type are Burning Man and Burning Man adjacent ones, which are mostly regional burns, kind of like mini Burning Mans in like various states or countries that are kind of like third party ones, but like Burning Man models of being nonprofit oriented. And these ones, I'd say it's not as big of a jump from Camping Music Festival to Burning Man Festival. Like you're at Burning Man, I'm just going to use that kind of as the case in point here. You're still camping, right? Like you still need to be prepared for that, but the conditions are almost always going to be harsher. So you're dealing like you can't just do a normal camping tent. Like you probably want a shift pod or something that's like a lot sturdier against the elements. A decent amount of camping festivals you can get away with without having like an AC unit or anything like that. At Burning Man, if you have a tent, you should have an AC unit. So otherwise, you're going to be fucked during the day because it can get like 110, 120 degrees.
That's wild.
Desert. That's wild. And then that's one where, to me, the biggest change is it's a mental shift from being purely an attendee and a consumer of the experience to a creator of the experience for other people. Luckily, this is something that quite a few people I've seen at camping festivals do take on, like they'll make really cool totems and they'll give out little rave toys. And honestly, one of my favorites was, so at Shams, there was this sick totem that I saw everywhere that, the product, I can't believe it's not butter.
Yeah.
Just like, right, this little like yellow like thing with fake butter or whatever the hell it is. So these people made a totem that was a giant yellow box that was like the branding of I can't believe it's not butter, but it said, I can't believe it's not Banadan, which...
What is that?
Oh, Banadan is like one of the most well-known songs of last year from the rave circuit. It's like, Banadan, Banadan, Banadan.
Oh, yeah.
Pang Banadan one. Yeah, anyway, fucking iconic. And I love that totem. I go up to them. I'm like, dude, y'all's totem is sick. And they're like, oh, like, thanks for letting us know. And they literally had stickers that had the I can't believe it's not Banadan. Like,
did you get one?
Yeah. I literally got one.
Nice.
Like, it's shaped like the I can't believe it's not butter. Like, it looks like it. And they even have fake nutrition facts, and they're like, base 400% like daily nutritional value on the fake nutrition facts label. Like, it's great, right? Like shit like that, where like some people do really go above and beyond on the camping fest. They'll coordinate outfits. Like groups will be like, they'll all dress up a certain way on certain days. And I'd say at Burning Man, it's that taken like even further into the extreme, where it's like people, you're really seeing them like bust out like all the efforts like on their outfits and their vibes. It's also a place where like getting to Burning Man is even harder, right? Like the tickets themselves are around the same price as a regular camping festival, but getting yourself there is a fucking journey. And I've always spent more money on like my logistics to get there than I have on like my actual Burning Man ticket stand.
That's dude, like, you were telling me, man, like renting an RV and shit if you want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, by my estimates, like I think someone could have a decent burn with spending like 2,000 to 3,000. Parts of that are like one-time fees. Like once you have a shift pod, like you have a shift pod and you're good as long as you take good care of it. But it's definitely pricier. And then that space where you have no vendors, right? Like there's no place to buy food or buy water. Like you need to come prepared.
I wanted to ask you about that. Is that not part of like are there no like camps that just give out food and water like as their gift or whatever?
So there are quite a few camps that give out food, and there's a lot of camps that give out like alcohol, drinks, just like bars. But it's a very, very bad call to rely on these. And honestly, all the food camps I've been to, there's usually a pretty long line, and they don't give you a very substantial amount of food. It'll be like a couple donut holes or a small taco, and most of them are only open at certain times of the day. Like, for example, I'd say the most popular types of food camps are breakfast camps, because like sunrises at Burning Man are a very big deal. And so you have like Sunrise Diner and like Bubbles and Base, where they give out like champagne at sunrise and like stuff like that, right? But like to me, the core tenet of Burning Man is radical self-reliance. Like, at the end of the day, you are the only person you can rely on. And any kind of food and stuff that you encounter like out in the city should be like a treat instead of something that you're subsisting off of. Because there have been times where it's like sunrise and I'm kind of biking back to camp and I'm like, oh, I'm hungry, but I want to make food. Like I love to just stumble onto a breakfast camp, and like they're hard to find, especially when you're really trying to, like just in Burning Man way. And even the ones you do find, like, it's not like a full meal by any means. Sometimes it can be, but rarely. And so, yeah, you need to be prepared. And they're all small things at Burning Man where it's like, okay, you can get like your RV tanks pumped, you can get like water refilled, things like that. But again, not things you can rely on, because sometimes those trucks don't make it out to your camp and you're like, well, shit, you can't just be out of water. And so that's where like, yeah, you and your camp and your community, like you guys are largely on your own. And so that's definitely a big, I think, mental shift as well, where it's like, yeah, you don't have anyone to rely on. And like, also if something goes wrong at Burning Man, like there are medical personnel, but man, there's not that many. Like it's a city of 80,000 people. There's only so many medical personnel, and like, yeah, like you got to be careful. Like you do not fuck around at Burning Man with stuff that you don't understand. That
talk about high barrier to entry, bro.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like absolutely. And then in terms of like the legality of stuff, like man, actually getting drugs into Burning Man and doing drugs at Burning Man is probably one of the toughest like drug related scenarios, right? Like even from getting drugs at Burning Man, most people are flying in or you can road trip in, but when you're driving to the actual Burning Man site, you're driving through these like tiny towns with a population of 100, 200 people. And you have these like speed traps where literally you'll go from like 70 miles an hour speed limit to like 15 or 20. And you literally have cops just waiting to pull people over. And they know it's Burning Man. They know people probably have drugs. And like they will tear your car apart until they find something.
Wow.
So gotta be careful with that shit. Going into the festival, like the people who work for Burning Man who search cars and RVs, they're not looking for drugs. They're looking mainly for like stowaways, so people who don't have tickets. And if you're trying to bring in any like pets or plants or fireworks or firearms, which are all like really big no-nos. But once you're in Burning Man also, right, like we've talked about at length, like undercover cops and all these things that actually make it where like that is a place where you have to be, to me, the most on your guard with doing drugs versus like, dude, when I went to Shambhala, like literally everyone's just snorting shit like out in the wide open. Like that's part of that festival's unique culture. I assume you can't be quite that open with it at something more like an Insomniac event in the US, like Forest or Beyond Wonderland or whatever. But yeah, man, Burning Man's a wild place. And while I don't have any experience with the regional burns, similar vibe in terms of like what your expectations should be, where it's like, I'd say it's like a camping festival with an extra layer of planning and consideration on top of it. Oh, and not to mention, if you're going with a camp, you're probably going to have to do volunteer shifts with your camp. You're probably going to have to help out. And so Burning Man is not just you go and you have fun. It can be fucking work. And the amount of work that it is for you will depend wildly on your camp. But you should. To me, a burn is incomplete without putting some work in.
Right.
Like while you're there, like working a couple of shifts, whatever they may be. Yeah.
Damn. That's sick. I still got to go sometime, man. That's on the bucket list for sure.
Dude, as soon as you feel ready, let me know, man. We'll make it happen and have plenty of options and opportunities for you to get involved, man. Would love to see you guys out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope this was informative. I hope this gave you guys kind of a more effective way to think about different festivals. And if you're thinking of like getting into that scene and debating where to go, I hope this gave you kind of like a framework to start thinking about it. And if you guys have questions about specific music festivals, feel free to drop them in the comments. There's definitely way more festivals that I have not been to than I have been. But I've heard about a lot of the good ones and kind of like what reputations each one has, especially for the vibes and kind of music. So happy to answer any questions in the comments.
And that's today's pod.
You've been listening to Modern Day Hippie. As you exit the portal, we have just one small ask of you. If you learned something new today, had a laugh, or resurfaced a drug story of your own, we want to hear about it. Drop us a comment on YouTube and show us some love on your favorite podcasting platforms. Internet algorithms really dog on us because of the topics that we discuss, so your support goes even further here than you might think. We'll catch you next week.